My basic idea is that the demographics actually underlie all the politics. All of our public assumptions and beliefs about services and taxation and about priorities for California policy, they're all based on the demographic assumptions focused on children. The only question is, are those assumptions, are they valid? Are they outdated maybe? And really, what's likely for the future? What's happened in the last 20 years is always what people plan for in the next 20 years. We're always fighting the last war is how they call it. And we have ideas from the past, but the demographics are shifting so radically, and not in the ways that even that you've heard most publicly, but other ways that the old game plan is a recipe for disaster, given the new reality. So let's revisit the old assumptions and the narratives, the stories that are told based on those assumptions. Now, I'm going to caricature this a little bit, but you just nod your head if you think that you've heard this before, because I think you have. Demographic change is threatening us. We're being overrun. And children, in particular, there's way too many of them. And they're frankly a burden on the taxpayers. And we certainly don't need other people's kids. We really just can't afford it. And that's in the mindset of many people. I'm sympathetic to that because I believe that in democracy, people vote their interests. At least I hope they vote their interests and not vote mythology or some values that are distorted. And people are worried about the pocketbook, and that makes sense. We're still recovering from the Great Recession. We don't have lots of extra change to throw around. We want to make sure it goes where it counts. But these are the old assumptions. And I'm going to tell you every one of them is wrong. And we'll look at the facts on this. But first, I want to give you a bigger picture, and I'm going to have to lay some theory on you, not too heavy. People talk about a social contract oftentimes, usually when they're arguing for their idea. Their idea is supported by a social contract. I'm going to give you the more flexible definition, and then you'll see how it really does work and how it can be useful to everybody, because voters really are guided by this unstated social contract they have in their mind. So what is it? Here's a simple theory. A social contract is formed of the shared social understandings that support cooperation among self-interested people, i.e. voters, self-interested people who possess unequal resources. And the basic question is, why should we share? What's it for? And the shared social understanding at the top is really the most important line, because that's what drove the success of America in the post-war era after the Great Depression and World War II, when people were bonded together in unison and overcame great obstacles. They had a shared understanding about the ravages of poverty and the need to protect people's homes from being foreclosed and investment in higher education. We had all the VA programs. There's enormous improvements that happened in that period because of its shared experience we were overcoming. Well, now it's more confused today as to what that shared experience is. The Great Recession was not great, and the recovery's been slow, and so there's lots of discord. So I'm going to speak to the shared social understandings in particular, because especially as it regards kids. So what is social understanding? Too many children? We actually are age top-heavy now, with too few children. California actually lost, in the last decade, 3% of all its kids under age 10, statewide. And some places, parts of the state lost even more. And we're still not adding kids. I'll show you the details on that, because many people think that some people are having too many kids. Well, I'm a demographer. I get to count babies. These are data from the State Department of Finance. They think it's important. The Department of Finance runs this demographic shop to keep track. How many babies being born? How many school kids that they need to know? And here's the data from 2000 and the projections going out to 2020. And I want to show it to you by ethnicity, because sometimes people say that some groups are having too many kids. Well, the dotted line there, the big white dots, let me point to it here. I think I can point to it. That right there, that's the total for everybody. The gray bar here is the replacement level. You need 2.1 babies per woman to maintain a steady state. And below that, you start to decline in the long run. So we're hovering right around that, at least we were, and now we are falling below. We're down to here right now. and they're projecting that it's probably going to stay like that for the rest of the decade and beyond. So we are below replacement level. Previously, we had one group that was contributing more kids. That was the Latinos, up at the top, Latinas. But it wasn't that many. It wasn't 5 children per woman. It was 2.7, which is a lot more than other people. But still, with that, we weren't really quite breaking even then. And now they have fallen. They're down to here right now, and expected to go to there. So they're actually below break even too. Nobody's having too many kids. In fact, nobody's having enough kids. And I'm not going to get into the business of how we encourage young women to have more kids. It's been tried. This problem is occurring across the developed world. It's all across Europe. Southern Italy, well, all of it. Italy has 1.3 babies per woman. I mean, they're really going down. Japan is actually declining in total population now. They're at 1.2 babies per woman. And even in Germany, it's 1.6. The highest country in Europe, I think, is Sweden, 1.8, which is about where we are as a nation. We're about 1.8. So there's too few children across the world, in the developed world, which means we don't have enough workers coming in the future for the developed world. Unless we import a lot more immigrants, which is what's happening in Europe. Germany is actually encouraging more immigrants in order to fill the gap. We're fortunate in California that we are closer to being break even. But it's only with the contributions of everybody, and nobody's contributing too many kids. So just to look at counting the babies some more, we can actually look at the number of babies that were born. And what I'm interested in is, what was the old attitude? Why do we think we have too many kids? Where does that come from? And how does that compare to today? So here's how it happens, I think. This is the actual number of babies born. This is thousands. So we got up to 600,000 babies per year in 1990. And at that rate, see, I'm also an urban planner as well as a demographer, so I know that people always extrapolate. And they say, well, at that rate, we're going to be all paved over parking lots. Well, at that rate, we're going to be all condominiums. Well, at that rate, we're going to have these kids going through the ceiling. Just look at these numbers here. And that's what people kind of expected. It's at this rate, we're going to go through the ceiling. We cannot afford that up there. You want to see the facts? What really happened after that? That's the subsequent number of babies born per year. Even though California's population is more than 30% larger than it was back in 1990, the number of kids is fewer than back in 1990. And the projection from the State Department of Finance is to stay about that same level. So we really haven't kept up with the 1990 peak, and we sure aren't keeping up with that wild extrapolation that people are still acting on politically because that's what they remember in their minds. It's an attitude based on the projection that they were fearful about. And we haven't quite seen the reality of it. That's not what it is. So we've developed some new generational insights by looking at, what do people think happened and what is happening and how do we look at the connections here? It's coming way too soon, and that's a big change. A 20-year revision in the forecast. Population is still growing, just a lot more slowly because of many fewer babies being born and also many fewer immigrants arriving. I'll show you that later. So there's a big change. We have to think about this. So let's look at it by age group, because it really does begin all with the kids, and then it continues. I mean, one thing about being a demographer, and I'm very proud of this, that we're much smarter than economists. And I say this to my economist colleagues and when they're in the room, and they don't really like it. They get me other ways later. But they have to admit that I have some facts here, some truth. Because, I think economics is the most important thing. I really do. But they can't predict anything 3 months ahead. They don't know interest rates 3 months from now. They don't know. They really don't know. And they can't even explain why the employment went up or down. Or they really don't know. But demographers, we are wise and old people. We know that in 10 years' time, everybody in this room is going to be 10 years older. And I challenge you to refute that point. And I think that's a good place to start when you want to get consensus in a political discussion. Let's start with some facts we can agree on. And you can start right there. And that means that, the people who are middle-aged are going to be retired. It also means that we're going to be replaced by younger people who are growing up into the workforce. And it does start with kids. And those kids, that girl in second grade, she's going to be a 27-year-old worker. And you can count on it. She will grow up. And so if we invest more in her, we get a better worker, a stronger taxpayer. So that's my punchline for the whole day. I can go home now. All right, so let's look at the data. This is what it was the last 20 years. This is the growth between 1990 and 2010 by 5 years age groups. Now, there's one, I painted the baby boomers there green. I made them green for 3 reasons. First off, those are my people. And they're the good guys. They're the big taxpayers. They're the prime, that age range is the prime earners. And they really are the custodians of the society, really. And the millennials they're in red there. They were children back, the growth in the last 20 years. But that's the last 20 years. And people's attitudes and priorities and policies are based on what they saw the last 20 years. Let's look ahead, the next 20 years. And we're pretty sure about this. The next 20 years looks like that. And lo and behold, 20 years, you add 20, and the good guys have now crossed age 65, and maybe now we're the bad guys. We are now receiving benefits that we deserve because we paid into it, but there's a lot of us. A lot. And so there's a lot of growth. Before, if you look back in the last 20 years, there's very little growth among seniors. Very little. And all of a sudden we have this. It's a huge shift. And we haven't thought ahead about it. What does that look like? What does that mean? How does it work? And we really don't have a lot of growth in here where we had major increases of prosperity in those age ranges. And now we have relatively fewer people, and even negative in some groups here. And the millennials, you hear about them a lot, but they're not a big enough bump to replace the huge impact that the baby boomers had. So that's a big shift. This is happening all across the nation. It's not just California. It's everywhere. And I'll point this out, what it means, but it's pretty serious. I developed a ratio I call the senior ratio. It's just the number of people age 65 and older. Those aren't all retirees, but they're people all Medicare eligible, and Social Security kicks in full benefit to 67. And retirement does come somewhat after 65, if not a little before 65. So it's a good group to focus on. And I want to make a ratio between that and the working age population. Now, there's some professional disagreement about that. Some of the Census Bureau reports say age 18 is working age. Labor Department says age 16 is working age. The United Nations says it's 15. I think what they mean there in the United Nations, they're looking at third world nations, and if you're 15 years old and you are a healthy young farm worker, you're strong enough to lift bales of hay and to get pregnant. And so we're going to count you as an adult at age 15. But in our society, our post-industrial society, we want people in school at age 15 and continuing through college. And in fact, the tax data show that people don't really contribute any extra money until after they're age 25. Before age 25, well, I don't know about your kids, but they're still on the parents' insurance policies, or they're interns, or they're apprentices, or they're in training, they're in Sierra College. That's where they should be. And so I'm making this professional point because I do it by dividing by working ages 25 to 64. And so here's what I get. Here's my ratio. The population is 65 plus per 100, age 25, 64. And I thought I'd compare a few states for you so you can see where California fits in. And that is Arizona, which is an older state. And you see how it was pretty steady there, about 26 seniors per 100. And then it skyrockets to 45. There goes the whole U.S. New Jersey. There's California. We were a young state, about 21 seniors per 100, and now we're going up to over 40. And Texas, a little bit younger still, but they're all doing the same thing. It's because the baby boom, it's not rocket science. The baby boom is crossing age 65. You know, I have to confess, I'm getting about there myself, and so it's going to happen. And as we flood across age 65, it's just the baby boomers are driving these ratios up. That's what's doing it. I thought I should put this in here. You care about Placer County, yeah? Okay, so how do they compare? So here's Placer, Sacramento region, and again, the U.S. total in California comparison. Placer's a little bit older than California. But whatever it is, it was at 24, and it's going up over 4 years. It's more than doubling its senior ratio. So it's already high and going up, but it's not really any different than everybody else. This is a common problem we have to solve as a state and as a nation, and it starts in every locality. Every locality is the grassroots where we solve the problem, because that's where the schools are, that's where the kids live, that's where they're born. They're all local. And then later on, we might share them with some other counties if they pay us something. Well, they won't pay us, but we have a shared duty with everybody else. So there we are. That's the ratio, and we have to plan for that. It's only sensible, because we know that everybody's going to grow up in 10 years, be 10 years older. Well, here's what's going on. This is the trigger of all these crises you read about, and about Social Security and pension funds and Medicare, healthcare crisis, workforce replacement, all these retirees, taxpayer replacement crisis, the growing deficit. The deficit you hear about is largely because of growing senior expenses, which we deserve. I got to keep emphasizing that. So, but it's built in there, and so that's where it comes from. It's not from foolish spending. You spend it on me when I'm a retiree. That's not foolish. I deserve it. But it does have implications. And there's a home seller crisis, because all of us older people, we own homes, and we got to sell them to somebody. And that ratio that was flat for a long time is now tilting like that. It kind of says there's a lot more sellers in the future than there are buyers, unless we really cultivate that younger generation and really strengthen them so they can make those home purchases when we need them to. Not now, but 10 years, 20 years ahead. So the likely responses to the senior ratio, and my economist friends, I do have a few friends still among the economists, they tell me that all these are actually happening. It's reducing growth in GDP, slows it down because there's fewer workers being added, fewer families, middle-aged families who are doing big spending. There's delayed retirement by seniors. There's already been delaying benefits for seniors. The age of eligibility has been pushed back. And there are higher taxes on both the young and the old, which are needed to balance the system. In all this, the good news is that young adults are in really supreme demand. They're coming off a very bad period where the unemployment rate was especially high for young people. I know. I have two sons who are millennials. When they graduated out of college into the teeth of the recession, they didn't get nothing. I mean, they were driven out of state. They had to go to Texas. It was really bad in California, but that's really turned around now. It's amazing how much unemployment rates have fallen. I mean, we're getting down below 5% unemployment. That's really, really good. And so there's not enough young people to fill the jobs. I've done some work on the baby boomer retirements, and it's guaranteed that we are going to delay. And after we put the delay factor in there, we still have like 56 million workers to replace, and not really enough young people to do it. So it's going to put supreme demand on getting these young people. And now the really good news, I think, is, and I think this one, we have reliance on immigrants already, but immigrants have abandoned us somewhat. There's not a growth in immigration. I'll come back to that. But the really good news, I think, is that there's going to be a rediscovery of neglected minority youth. People who are, not everybody has understood this yet. They don't realize that not only are minority youth deserving in themselves, but they are not enough youth. And the neglected youth are the ones we have the biggest upside potential. They're the ones that can actually expand their capabilities and help us as the senior ratio rises. That's our greatest potential of growth, is by activating that underused, neglected resource, young children who haven't been getting the best education in the past. That's where we can do the most in the future. So we need to discover the new, really the critical economic importance of children. There's not enough of them, and we need to rely on them more in the future. I developed an index. I won't walk through it here. I did this for the Lucille Packard Foundation, but it's pretty simple. It just says that when you're born, your importance is based on how high will the senior ratio be when you get to be age 25. So everybody's going to be moving forward in time. We know the kids are going to be 25, and when they get there, how high will the ratio be? And so it looks like this. There's California, it has the longest record here in gold, and then there's Placer County, which is a little bit higher than then California, at least up until age, this is for year of birth, up to age 2015. And so it says that kids that were born before 1985, we're going to hold them as call them normal, and after that, these kids become extra normal, important. And this group right in here, born from 2005 to 2020, they're all about double. Whether you look at Placer or all Sacramento or California, they're all about double in importance. And those are ones that they've already started being born, and they're going to keep being born through the end of this decade. And they're just a critical resource that really max out all the potential. So they're the ones that are the most important for meeting the incredible needs that we're facing here in a couple of decades ahead. So children are fewer in number, but they're twice as critical to meeting our economic needs. And we need to get each youth to grow into his or her strongest capabilities. So being a demographer, I thought, well, let me get some facts on that. How are we doing around the country anyway? How's California compared to everybody else? So how well are states preparing their most critical resource? And the average is $10,700 being spent per pupil, K through 12. And then California is 14% below the average. So it's not true. We're not at the bottom. But, it really depends on how much money you have to spend and how high are the incomes in your state. Some of these states are like New York on top and Alaska and Connecticut. Those are really high-income states probably. And so they can afford to spend more, and poor states are near the bottom probably. Let's look at that. Let's look at median income. Median household income by state, and there's the national average, $52,000. And California is $60,000. It's 15% above the national average. So, there's and I don't know, I wonder where Placer is in here. I think I was looking at some material on the tables outside. Placer was up here above 72,000, somewhere up here. So I don't know, Placer would be up there, I don't know. Well, anyhow, so it's just useful to see California in perspective. And if you combine with income on the horizontal, and then you look at spending on the vertical, and you see that diagonal line, that's sort of the normal line, and you spend more if you have higher incomes. The red dot at the very bottom down there is Mississippi. So they're right on track. Mississippi is the poorest state, and it's spending right about what it should be spending, given how poor it is. And the big yellow dot, that's us, that's California. And we're falling off the normal line. We're falling below. I know you want to know what the other state is down below us here. Who's that? They're really bad. Well, that's Utah. They're a special case. Utah has a special education system, and they have one whole extra kid per house. So they're beyond everybody else in the nation. So they're different. But California, there might be room to fund a little more, it looks like. So let's look at other sources of workers. What about the immigrants? That's another part of the story, that California's awash in immigrants, and immigrants either, I should say I'm working on a National Academy of Science panel right now with our report due out in 2 weeks for the nation, looking at this issue about immigrant workers and what they contribute or what they take. And there's a lot of mythology that people have. So either we're awash in immigrants, and they're taking all the benefits, or they make no difference, or what is it? We don't know. Let's just count them. I just want to stick to counting people. So won't they help us? Or do they hurt us? Well, let's just count them. Either way, there's not as much of an impact as people think. It's exaggerated. So counting the numbers, this is the annual arrival of immigrants over since 1970. The percentage increase in the flow, the annual flow. So starting from whatever the 1970 level was, you want to see how much the flow increases, and that's for the U.S. So it's steadily increased and then exploded in the 1990s, peaked out around 2000, has been declining. It was declining before the recession hit, and it's continuing to decline. It's maybe leveled off now, I think. There's California, which peaked in 1990. And the reason the U.S. went up later is because California's recession was so bad in the 1990s that it deflected immigration to other states. And so it went over, the U.S. continued to grow, and California went down, and continued to just decline steadily. The jobs weren't here, and the housing prices were too high, And once immigrants discovered good jobs and cheap houses everywhere else, why would you come to California? The only immigrants coming to California, unless you have elite jobs in Silicon Valley that are attracting you, the only immigrants coming are visiting their friends and their relatives who already live here. That's the only reason they would come here. Otherwise, they go someplace that would be a better deal economically. LA County has had the biggest downturn because we have the worst job market, maybe, or the highest prices, whatever. We're back to where we were in 1970. So whatever the myth was of rapidly rising immigration, it's subsided. And it's not a major factor in California anymore as a source of growth. And in the U.S., it's kind of slowed down as well. So that's why I say it doesn't help or hurt as much as people think, because the trend is so moderated. Here in Placer County, you're the heart of the gold rush. That's what started everything. The gold rush brought people from all over the world to come to this state. And many of them stayed because of what they found here after they came. But they came for the gold originally. It started the migration. And ever since then, the majority of people in California have all been born somewhere else. And this is, for California, the birthplace origins by age group, 75 and older on top, and then the total population at the very bottom, but under age 5 for second from the bottom. And the Golden State is the majority of the younger population, by far. Only a little bit are born in other states. And at young ages, only a little bit are also foreign-born. The age group that has the most foreign-born is this one right here, which is 45-64. That's the highest share of foreign-born. And it's less foreign-born and a lot less foreign-born. And the homegrown is just dominant. I couldn't get data for Placer, I'm sorry. Oh yeah, I could. Here you go. I found it. And I also have it for all of Sacramento. You don't want to know, you also go back to Placer. Placer is fewer foreign-born than the state, and even more homegrown. The people living in Placer are much more likely to be native Californians. And that's politically really important, I think. Because I hope you see it this way, that the people who were born here and had their whole lives here are rooted. Now, I'm a transplant, but I've been in California for nearly 30 years. I'm a transplant. I consider myself a Californian. But don't get me wrong, I think that you can come from other states and still be a loyal Californian. But the data I have shows that if you were born here, you are more rooted. And I'll tell you a simple reason why. It goes back to basic demography, but not any numbers. It's just facts of life, basically. If you were born here, I'm pretty darn sure your mother lived here. And if your mother lived here, she's probably still, if she's alive, she's still here. And if you lived here, it means, if you were born here, it means you went to elementary school here and high school here, and you got all these high school buddies. I didn't go to high school here. I don't have any high school buddies from California. And that cuts me off from being connected at a deeper level. And so when it comes to charity time and people are trying to raise money for donations, fewer people tug on my sleeve. I don't have the high school friends who can say, hey, why don't you join my committee here? Why don't you come to my gala? You can buy a table. I have fewer people tugging on my sleeve. In other states that are full of homegrown, you see much more philanthropy for that reason. Much more, like Ohio. You wouldn't think it. Cleveland, Ohio, and Cincinnati, Ohio, where I did live. It's amazing because they're all homebodies, and they're all tied together by place of birth. So being more locally rooted, you're more locally committed by your friends. They just convince you to get on the team. And if everybody is not locally born, if you have more people who are temporary residents, or they're not as, they just don't feel as committed to helping out all their neighbors because they just don't share the same childhood bonds. So I think this is politically significant. And let's look at Sacramento as a whole. It's fairly similar there as well. A lot more homegrown. Basically, this is current data from 2014. The new data come out next week. I tried to get the presentation delayed another week or two. I could get you the newest data. It won't change these results. This is very slow moving. People don't get born and unborn. These results are going to be pretty good next year too. So your workforce in Sacramento area is at least half native Californian already. And these kids haven't grown up yet. once the kids grow up, they're going to be three-quarters Native Californian. And I guess the biggest takeaway for me based on that is, well, I'm really not show you this yet. I was going to give you the good news and the bad news. The takeaway for me is that if we really are dependent on the native children of California, then, I guess we have to get more serious about cultivating our own workforce. It used to be you could import workers, like me, get really good workers who were educated in Florida first, make Florida pay for it, and then we take the workers. Now, this is a really good strategy. It's being used by one state in the country right now to supreme excellence. And you have heard it, you've seen it, while your nose has been rubbed in it already. You know who I'm talking about, right? Texas. The state of Texas captured 2/3 of all the growth in children last decade. 2/3 of the growth was all in Texas because they were capturing the young parents of children who went there during the recession. It was a bad time. They went to Texas. Did Texas pay for the education of all those workers they imported? No. Iowa did, and Missouri, and other states. So if you don't have the in-migration of people from other states and you're dependent on your own, you have to grow your own, it changes the calculation over how important is it to invest in education. Now we don't have a safety valve of just importing workers from somewhere else. We're going to have to grow our own. Well, here's the data on spending and taxes. And the bad news is, look who's sucking up all the tax dollars. Just look at that. And I painted it red deliberately. That's a negative. All those kids under age 20 or under 24, that's where all the money's going. It's half the state budget. Is that bad? What's that money going for? Well, that's education spending. There's a little bit of a debate whether it's spending or is it investment. Because when you invest in a better educated kids, you get double the tax dollars or triple the dollars back. Higher education investments really pay off. But at an early age, you get a long-term investment payoff. But the money is there. And the tax dollars, who's paying all the taxes? Well, this is covered up. No one wants to talk about this. This is from demographers who developed this data. We're using the same thing for our national study now. It's really useful to see it by age. It really varies by age. And you know that the younger ages here are more often children of color, Latino or Asian or black. Whites are a minority of the kids. And the older people, you know, are more often white. And so there's also, in California, a racial divide between the taxpayers and the spenders. And so that has set up some debates or some dialogue. And I'll just repeat one line for you. It's kind of it's not really an ugly word, but it's definitely mean-spirited. And some of these people here get kind of grumpy that they're aged in their 50s. They're grumpy that their tax dollars are being spent on other kinds of people, namely these people down here, and they call these people a bad name. It's not really that bad, but it's mean-spirited. They call them the tax eaters. But here's the good people, the taxpayers. Here's the bad people, the tax eaters. That is perspective that only makes sense if you have a frozen mind. If you think, aha, we are not going to ever get older. I believe in Peter Pan. Only if you believe that those children will never grow up and the demographer here is wrong and you cannot add 10 to their age in 10 years and 20 in 20 years, only in that way does that make any sense to believe that way. But that's how we talk about politics. Politics is always about the next election, which is 2 years away, not about 10 years away when we're going to have a prosperous economy. And so we get a little bit too short-sighted, I think. But this is the facts on this. And I think, politically, how do you address this? Well, you show people that kids grow up and how valuable they are when they do grow up. And also, I think, and this is probably unique to me, you won't get it so often from children's advocates or from minority advocates. They won't do this as often. I'll just tell you straight out, you won't get anywhere if you don't show these people a lot of respect and praise them and recognize the fact that they are making a maximum contribution. They're spending more money than anybody, and thank you. You're doing a great job. We really need your help. And you really need to praise those taxpayers, acknowledge it. If you don't acknowledge it, they'll fight more and more and more because they're spending a lot of money. So that's the facts right there. These are data a little bit dated, but the same basic pattern today. And it's the same pattern in the U.S. as well. Kids are expensive. And we're looking at immigrant kids who are very expensive. It turns out, guess what? The native-born kids are really expensive too. All kids are expensive. And if you don't realize it's an investment, why have any kids at all? You know, obviously it's an investment, but we just don't make that part of the dialogue. I have a simple model here. I just leave this idea on the table here, and I think you'll see this. This does it. It says everything. Guess what? It's a cycle of life. It's a cycle of roles. This is the American way. This is how we always used to do it, and how it's also done in every nation on the planet does it the same way. The kids are dependents. The kids receive investments. Here I put education investments. You also get health care and other kinds of care. Like, lo and behold, the kids grow up, become young adults. They become new workers, new home buyers, new taxpayers, and then they grow up more and become mature adults and become the prime working age taxpayers, and they get the honor and duty of being the maximum taxpayers. That's their role in life, is to support everybody else at that age. You support the kids and you support the seniors, and in return, when you grow up, you get to be a senior too. You get to be a senior too, and you get all the benefits that you paid into the system for. And so that's how it works. And in California, we forgot this because we had so many migrants who moved in from other states, other nations. They did not remember that they were connected in this life cycle. But now we have a homegrown population, but we are there. No youth can be neglected. All hands on deck. No dropouts, certainly. Early childhood interventions, we need them all the way. It's not just a nice thing to do. It's an economic boost for the younger and the older Californians alike. Everybody needs this to happen. So I'll just finish up here by showing you the two social understandings. The old one, which we went through before, is totally replaced now by the new one. Children are declining and becoming scarce in number. They're an urgently important investment. We don't need other people's kids. Well, we desperately need more children to support our rising senior ratio. We really can't afford it. Well, we really should invest earlier. We wish these children of immigrants weren't imposed on us. Well, we are thankful for the children contributed by every immigrant and every other parent. We don't have enough. This is the American dream of buying a house. But the old folks need the young to get to the top. My final point is that we totally need other people's kids. Thank you.